A major gift pool might look really healthy until you really start to peel back the layers of the constituency. That mid-level giving is where future major gifts are either accelerated or lost. So how are we paying attention to that bridge in the middle? It's really about starting with behavior. What are those data points that you might already be collecting, or maybe you have the ability to collect? What is that repeat giving plus intentional upgrade?
You're listening to The Nonprofit Boost, where Double the Donation and industry leaders share practical tips to help you grow revenue and boost corporate fundraising at your nonprofit. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nonprofit Boost podcast. I'm your host, Immaculate. Today, we're going to be tackling a problem that I know might keep many of us thinking, being data rich, but insight poor. Your CRM is a gold mine, but right now it might feel somewhat like a maze. Fundraising is often siloed without a clear strategy to turn that messy data into actionable moves. And you're likely facing what I like to call the gift leak, the major gifts that slip through the cracks because we didn't see the signs. So in today's episodes, we're giving you a toolkit to fix that. You'll walk away with the shift from simple wealth markers to motivation mapping, 3 key signals that tell you a donor is ready for that next action, that bigger conversation, and a look at how automation acts as a catalyst to scale your pipeline even faster. And to help us navigate this, I'm thrilled to welcome Sarah Clough. Sarah is the Chief Strategy Officer and Vice President of Philanthropy Insights and Analytics, as well as a Senior Consultant and Principal at Marts&Lundy. She has partnered with more than 100 mission-driven organizations to design and implement successful million-dollar and billion-dollar initiatives. She's a certified Pro-Sci change management practitioner, which means she specializes in helping organizations navigate transformational shifts to drive sustainable growth by turning ambitious goals into actionable insights. Sarah, I'm so excited you can join us today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
Yay! Well, Sarah, as I briefly touched in our introduction, a persistent struggle for many of us is identifying which donors are really ready to take that next action, have that bigger conversation. So to kick off our discussion, I was wondering if you could share a little bit of the core strategy or core challenges, that are encountered in major donor prospecting today.
Of course. So I really think that the real leak is not necessarily that donors can't give more. It's that organizations sometimes fail to recognize or respond to, or sometimes even intentionally steward donors whose behavior signals readiness. It's that behavior piece that I think we'll talk a lot about in our conversation today. So I think you mentioned earlier is over-reliance on wealth markers. Many prospecting models, they really still overweight capacity and sometimes underweight that demonstrated engagement. And this can cause organizations to really miss some of those highly motivated donors who haven't yet necessarily shown up as capacity on paper. We sometimes also see a pipeline fragility beneath that very top. So a major gift pool might look really healthy until you really start to peel back the layers of the constituency. And what we find is that mid-level giving is where future major gifts are either accelerated or lost. So how are we paying attention to that bridge in the middle?
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing those challenges. I'm really excited to be diving deeper into strategies and how to overcome a number of the ones you just shared right now. So let's get into it. First, let's touch on, identifying major donor prospects, your work in building donor resilience. You mentioned shifting again from wealth markers to behavioral, analytics. So how can a team start motivation mapping without feeling too overwhelmed, like making that huge shift?
Sure. Yeah. It's really about starting with behavior. So you really don't need complex predictive or AI models to begin. You just need to identify what are those data points that you might already be collecting, or maybe you have the ability to collect. So that could be giving frequency and upgrade patterns. It could be event attendance or program engagement. It could even be response to impact reporting or targeted appeals, or even your social media. often we find that biggest challenge here is that not all of these behaviors are being systematically tracked within your systems right now. But the thing I always remind clients is it's never too late to start. So as long as you have the mechanisms to start tracking them, just get started. And then you'll have some of that behavioral data that you can weave into your models or other things that you're trying to build in order to track that behavior. You can also look at developing some microsegments. So you don't want to over engineer activity here. So we want to think about segmenting donors by why they give rather than life stage or specific demographics, which tends to be the default when we're thinking about some of these microsegments or donor journeys. If we focus on the why of why they give, we're thinking about things that are impact driven or they're loyalty driven or they're driven by aspects of their community. So even if you start with, say, 3 to 4 motivational profiles, they can dramatically improve the relevance to the key segments within your constituency that maybe you haven't been talking to in a really refined way so far. Another piece I think too is thinking about those friction points. So often we're most focused on what's working really well and we're paying really close attention to that data. But what are those friction points that some of our donors are finding? Is it, where they go in to make the gift, they can't make the gift, it's not successful? Or, after their first 1K gift, maybe they're stalling out there, or maybe they're stalling out after their first upgrade. So really thinking about what are those pause points where intention exists, but we haven't necessarily supported them to continue making an impact.
Nonprofits are always being asked to do more with limited time and resources. Double the Donations virtual summits offer practical insights, expert advice, and actionable ideas to help you grow your impact. Check out the summit calendar and register at doubletheDonation.com/virtual-summits. We'll see you there.
I love that point you made about friction, because that's something we also notice like on our side when it comes to like workplace giving, to the point that like we notice that someone's not interacting with any of the plugins or any of the emails that we've sent. And so something really cool that we've actually seen and started implementing is having this email where they can specifically mention why are they not interacting with us. And so really reducing that friction point where we probably didn't realize that there was a reason why they're interacting, but we never asked that question. And so now we've been able to ask that question, and now you can take that next step to steward them in a way that, clearly they can't maybe interact with workplace giving this way, but they can in this way. And so that gives you a lot of information on how to carry that that relationship forward. So thank you so much for really speaking to that engagement markers, and that made me think about spotting the signals. And so speaking of signals, Sarah, I loved your perspective on that missing middle. You mentioned this earlier as like a tier where the resilience really lives. And so for someone who's managing their list of donors, what are some of the 3 specific data points that someone can be seeing and be like, oh yeah, they're definitely screaming that this donor is ready or qualified to move up in their donor journey?
A few things that come to mind. The first is really, what is that repeat giving plus intentional upgrade? So a donor might be giving consistently and they've taken at least one meaningful step up in giving. It doesn't even necessarily have to be big, but it's deliberate. You can see the difference in those numbers. That can often signal confidence that the donor has in the organization. So they're stepping even beyond that entry level generosity, and now they feel confident that their gifts are going to continue to have impact. So we want to see that repeat giving plus that upgrade. Another signal might be high engagement density. So they're engaging with you in multiple ways. It could be an event, it could be surveys, it could be email clicks, it could be volunteering, it could be, being an advocate for you on any social media channels. Engagement across different channels often will matter more than gift size alone. And that's the thing I want to emphasize here, is that we're looking at multiple points of engagement. Again, that density of engagement, we're so hyper-focused sometimes on that gift size and whether or not they've stepped up. We're ignoring all of that other aspects. And often we're not seeing, or we're not in all those rooms where a constituent is raising their hand. And so those behavioral things help us pick up on those other markers. A third signal is that their giving purpose is becoming clear. So their gifts really start aligning with specific programs or funds or outcomes. And that clarity is often the precursor to a larger, more strategic conversation. The trick is to pick up on that purpose becoming clear so that we can enter them into that conversation. What we often find is that mid-level readiness, it shows up as pattern plus purpose. It's not just that dollar amount.
I love that. I love how you shared that. Also, when you mentioned, like, sometimes there's signals that you don't see, or it's like we're too focused sometimes on the number. And so, like, something that we also see is like volunteering. I mean, there's someone that donates, but then they also volunteer, and maybe they volunteer a lot more, but there's a lot of value when it comes to volunteering too. So you can definitely take a look at your volunteering data if you haven't, because again, as you mentioned, it's really about connecting all that data you already have together, and that data is communicating effectively. So you really get a full picture of who that client is and why they're giving with you or giving to your mission. So I really love that. And also about the reoccurring gifts. Yeah, reoccurring gifts, very valuable. I love reoccurring gifts. So, okay, Sarah, to your point about removing friction from the giving experience, particularly with behavioral signal, that's something that strongly resonates with us and what we observed in the workplace giving environment. When we automate, the identification of a donor with a workplace giving program, such as matching gifts, it's more than just leveraging technology in our eyes. It's an active stewardship that empowers the donor, showing them that they can double their gift, their impact without sending any more money. And it's a really low friction moment. They see themselves as a catalyst, for your mission. Furthermore, a donor's interaction with these automated tools provides valuable intent data. So a donor who constantly engages with matching gift emails or initiates auto submission, so for this case, payroll giving, they're signaling both a high affinity for your cause, because again, they're taking that time they're confident in your cause, that they're willing to donate to you monthly through a payroll giving program, and a strong corporate influence. So they're aware of these corporate programs, and they're willing to use these corporate programs, or to utilize, these corporate programs. And so at least that's what we've seen, on our side. But I was just curious to know about your experience. How does automation act as a catalyst for that mid-level donor journey?
There's a few ways here. I think automation can really help manage that speed to relevance gap. So whether you're looking at elements like timely acknowledgements or impact follow-ups or some of those next step nudges, those are happening without delay. So donors feel seen in the moment that they're already starting to have an impact. They're already raising their hand. And then you're able to really curate that activity in a more effective way if you can automate some of the components that I just mentioned. It also frees up humans from meaning, not mechanics. So we want to make sure that, we don't want fundraisers bogged down into all the tracking and some of the mechanics of the day-to-day of things. It's helping them get to a point where they can focus their time and attention on more thoughtful outreach and discovery. So how are we utilizing and leveraging automation to help, create those signals that someone's ready to give at a higher level, so that then the fundraiser can engage with that individual on a deeper level. So here we want to think of automation supporting, not replacing the relationship. It's just allowing that relationship to move forward faster and sometimes deeper, because you're able to keep things moving. And then I'll go back to behavior, right? So, if we're able to automate how we're able to collect or show signals that someone is engaging with you across a bunch of digital tools, or, they're signaling some of that rising intent, that's actionable intelligence that you can dive right into strategy with, because you're able to bring that to the surface quicker.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, when I do like research on my organizations, or if I'm doing any research on an organization, it's amazing how I can check my email, and then 2 minutes later, they're like, "Hey, we saw you interacted on our website," or like, "You clicked on this article," and I'm like, "Oh, wow," and then I was like, "Okay," and then they give me other steps and how I can engage with them, and I just love it because it makes it really easy, top of mind, I won't forget, and then just really shows that they were paying attention to me, and in a nice, sweet way, and then they understood how I interacted with them. So I really love how automation has that power now to really, again, alleviate some of that work for our teams, but still keep the human touch side of it. So I love that. I love that. Well, we've talked about a lot of things and, from really changing our perspective, not just from the transactions, but really transforming it to something bigger, something a little bit more not as monetary, I guess you can say. Not that monetary isn't important. But before we let you go, we really love actionable insights on our podcast. So just curious, what is the single most actionable step that a nonprofit can take over the next month to really build and manage its prospect? I know one's a little hard, but something actionable.
I think the headline here is actually define and actually operationalize your mid-level segment. So when you really get into setting clear thresholds, you have some shared ownership across your entire constituency, whether it's annual or mid-level or major or principal giving. If it's not defined, that often means it's not tracked and there's nothing for strategy to really cling to. So if we're defining what does mid-level giving mean for our organization, because it's going to look different in every organization, and then how do we operationalize against that so we can make sure we're not neglecting that part of our constituency, we don't have that leaky bucket in the middle of our pipeline. If we really just sit down and talk about it and define it, that's where I see a lot of movement happen within the mid-level pipeline overall.
I love that. That was such I wouldn't say small thing. It's just a thing we can really start with and then, really continue with a purpose moving forward. So I love that actionable advice. Okay, again, thank you, Sarah, again for joining us and really helping us boost our impact today. But if anyone has any questions or, would like to reach out to you or Marts&Lundy, what's the best way for them to do so?
So you should be able to find me on LinkedIn under the name Sarah Clough. And then also you can always reach out to me via email at clough@martsandlundy.com.
Okay, great. Yeah, everyone who's tuning in, you can definitely find that in the description today. So feel free to check that out. And to all our listeners, thank you again for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe to the Nonprofit Boost podcast. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Here's your next steps. Visit doublethedonation.com to explore the tools and strategies that schools and nonprofits use to unlock more revenue through corporate fundraising. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your team and peers.